This is my present for you, cheating witch.
The ribs were perfect. That's what I kept telling myself as I watched my wife, Nicole, laugh at something my cousin Derek whispered in her ear. 4th of July weekend in suburban Tulsa, and my backyard was packed with relatives who'd driven in from 3 states to eat my barbecue and pretend we were still a happy family. "Uncle Travis, can I use Mom's iPad?" 10-year-old Caleb tugged at my shirt, Nicole's sister Jenna's kid. Sweet boy, always polite. "Ask your mom first," I said, flipping the rack of ribs with my tongs. The sauce caramelized beautifully in the Oklahoma heat. Nicole waved from across the yard where she stood near the beer cooler with Derek. "It's fine, honey. Just don't delete anything." I should have paid attention to the way Derek's jaw tightened when she said that. Should have noticed how quickly he looked away from the iPad in Caleb's hands. But I was focused on the meat, making sure everything was perfect for my family. 20 minutes later, Caleb came running around the corner of the house, his face pale and confused. He held the iPad like it might explode. "Uncle Travis," he whispered, glancing around to make sure no one else could hear. "I think there's something wrong with Aunt Nicole's pictures." My heart stopped. "What do you mean, buddy?" I was trying to find the games, but I opened the camera thing by accident. "There's a video." His voice trailed off. I set down my tongs and wiped my hands on my apron. "Show me." We walked behind the storage shed where no one could see us. Caleb handed me the iPad with shaking fingers. The video was paused on the first frame, but I could already see enough. Nicole's face. Derek's hands in her hair. The timestamp showed 3 hours ago. I hit play. "God, I've missed this." Nicole's voice came through the speakers, breathy and desperate. She was pressed against the workbench in my garage, Derek's mouth on her neck. "We have to be careful," Derek said, his hands sliding under her summer dress. "Travis will be back from the store soon." "I don't care anymore," she moaned. "I'm so tired of pretending." The video was 4 minutes long. 4 minutes of my wife and my cousin destroying 20 years of my life in the place where I fixed my truck and stored my Christmas decorations. When it ended, I just stared at the black screen. "Uncle Travis?" Caleb's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you okay?" I looked across the yard at Nicole, who was now serving potato salad to my father, Gene, recently returned from his latest disappearing act. She wore the yellow sundress I'd bought her for her birthday, the one she said made her feel beautiful. In the video, Derek had pushed it up around her waist. The ribs were starting to char on the grill. I could smell them burning. "Travis?" Nicole's voice behind me, sing-song and cheerful. "Everything all right back here?" I turned around slowly, still holding the iPad. She stood there smiling, lipstick perfectly applied, not a hair out of place. If I hadn't just watched that video, I never would have suspected a thing. "Just checking on Caleb," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Making sure he's not getting into trouble." She laughed, that bright laugh that used to make my chest warm. "Well, come on back. Your dad's telling war stories again, and Derek's threatening to start a horseshoe tournament." I looked at her for a long moment, memorizing her face. The last time I would see her this way, before everything changed. "I'll be right there," I said. "Just need to save the ribs." I grilled those ribs like my life depended on it, basted them with sauce, turned them every few minutes, checked the temperature with my meat thermometer. Normal. Everything had to look normal. Nicole sat at the picnic table between Derek and my father, laughing at something Derek said about his latest gym conquest. She'd always been good at pretending. 20 years of marriage, and I was just now realizing how good. "Travis makes the best barbecue in 3 counties, she announced when I carried the platters over. "Isn't that right, honey?" "That's what you always say," I replied, setting the meat down in front of Derek. He avoided my eyes, suddenly very interested in his beer. My father, Gene, clapped me on the shoulder. "Boy's got skills. Remember when you were 12 and burned those hot dogs to charcoal?" Everyone laughed, even me. The sound felt foreign in my throat. I sat down across from Derek and cut into my ribs. The meat was perfect, tender and smoky. I chewed slowly, watching him squirm in his seat. He kept glancing at Nicole, little worried looks that she pretended not to notice. "So Derek," I said, my voice casual as Sunday morning, "how's the personal training business?" He shrugged, still not looking at me. "Good, real good. Got some new clients this week. Anyone I know?" Nicole's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Derek's face went red. "Just some ladies from the country club," he said. "Nothing special." I bet they keep you busy, I said. All that one-on-one attention. The table went quiet. Gene looked between Derek and me like he sensed something brewing. Jenna was trying to get Caleb to eat his corn. Travis, Nicole said, her voice tight with warning. What's gotten into you? I took another bite of ribs, savoring the smoky flavor. Nothing at all, sweetheart. Just making conversation with my cousin. Derek finally met my eyes. There was guilt there, and fear, but also something else. Defiance. Like he was daring me to say something. So I did. I stood up fast, my chair scraping against the concrete patio. Derek's eyes went wide, but he didn't have time to react. I grabbed the front of his shirt and yanked him to his feet, sending his plate crashing to the ground. Travis, what the hell? He started, but I cut him off by shoving him backward into the food table. Potato salad and baked beans went flying. You son of a witch, I growled, my face inches from his. You think I'm stupid? He tried to push me away, but I'd been working construction for 20 years. I had 40 pounds and a lot more anger on him. We went down together, rolling across the patio while everyone screamed. Stop it, Nicole shrieked. Both of you, stop! Derek got a lucky shot in, his fist connecting with my jaw. Stars exploded across my vision, but I held on, driving my knee into his ribs. He grunted and tried to roll away. Travis, you're drunk, he gasped. Get off me! I haven't had a drink all day, I snarled, pinning him down with my forearm across his throat. But I've sure seen some interesting videos. His face went white. Nicole made a strangled sound behind me. I'm pregnant, she screamed suddenly. I'm pregnant, and you're acting like an animal. That stopped me cold. I looked up at her, my arm still pressed against Derek's windpipe. She stood there with tears streaming down her face, one hand pressed to her stomach. Derek's eyes went wide with shock. Pregnant? He whispered. I let him go and stood up slowly. My knuckles were scraped and bleeding. Derek's shirt was torn, and he had the beginning of a black eye. How long? I asked Nicole. 8 weeks, she said, not meeting my eyes. I looked at Derek, who was still sprawled on the ground looking stunned, then back at Nicole. Congratulations, I said quietly. I walked away from all of them, past Jean, who was reaching for me, past Jenna, who was covering Caleb's eyes. I went to the garage and stood there looking at my workbench, imagining what had happened there just hours ago. Behind me, I could hear Nicole crying and Derek trying to explain himself to anyone who would listen. The smell of charred meat drifted in from the patio. I pulled out my phone and called my boss, Riley. Riley, it's Travis. I need to take some time off. Everything okay, man? I looked around my garage at the tools I'd organized so carefully, at the oil stain on the concrete that I'd been meaning to clean up. No, I said. Everything's not okay. The group text started at 6:47 a.m. the next morning. I was sleeping in my truck in the driveway because Nicole had locked me out of my own house. Jenna, can someone please explain what happened yesterday? Rebecca, Nicole's mom. Travis had some kind of breakdown. Poor Nicole is beside herself. Jean. Boys got problems. Always did. I scrolled through 17 messages before I found one that wasn't painting me as the villain. My Uncle Pete from Amarillo. Pete, maybe there's more to this story. Travis isn't the type to lose it for no reason. Rebecca. He attacked Derek unprovoked in front of a child. Nicole. I can't even look at him right now. I feel sick. I turned off my phone and walked up to my front door. My key didn't work. She'd changed the locks overnight. Through the window, I could see my coffee mug still sitting on the kitchen counter from Saturday morning, back when I thought I had a marriage. At 10 a.m., a police cruiser pulled into my driveway. Officer Martinez got out, looking apologetic but official. Mr. Galt, I have a temporary restraining order here. You need to stay at least 100 yards from your wife and this property. I took the papers with hands that shook slightly. This is my house. I've been paying the mortgage for 15 years. Yes, sir, I understand. But right now, you need to leave. You can contact a lawyer about the property issues. I looked past him at my house, at the bedroom window where Nicole was probably watching. The curtain twitched. Can I get some clothes? Not without supervision and her permission. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Her permission to get my clothes from my house. Martinez looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, sir. Just following the law. I drove to a motel on the south side of town, the kind of place where they don't ask questions and the ice machine's always broken. $26 a night, weekly rates available. I paid for a week with my debit card and sat on the bed that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. My phone buzzed. A Facebook notification. Nicole had posted a picture of herself and Derek at Romano's, an upscale Italian place downtown. They were sitting close together, his arm around her shoulders. The caption read, "Fresh start, #blessed, #new beginnings." 43 likes in 20 minutes, including one from my own father. I screenshot the photo and saved it to my phone. Then I drove to the library and used their computer to research divorce lawyers. Attorney Sarah Sykes had an office in a converted Victorian house near downtown. Her receptionist, a stern woman in her 60s, looked me up and down like she was deciding whether I could afford the consultation fee. "Mr. Galt, Miss Sykes will see you now." Sarah Sykes was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-40s, with sharp eyes and a handshake that could crack walnuts. Her office was all dark wood and law books, the kind of place where serious business got done. "Tell me what happened," she said after I'd settled into the leather chair across from her desk. I told her everything. The video, the fight, the restraining order, the Facebook post. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her expression never changing. "Do you still have the video?" she asked when I finished. "On the iPad, but it's in the house, and I can't get to it. We'll subpoena it." "What about the child she claims to be carrying?" 8 weeks, she said. "We haven't been intimate in about 3 months. Sykes made another note. "I'll need you to get a paternity test once the child is born. In the meantime, we file for divorce on grounds of adultery and alienation of affection. Oklahoma's still a fault state, which works in our favor. How long will this take? Depends on how hard she wants to fight. But with photographic evidence and the restraining order she filed in bad faith, we've got a strong case. She overplayed her hand." I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt since Saturday, hope. That night, I drove past my house after midnight. Derek's truck was in my driveway. The apartment above Mike's auto repair wasn't much to look at, one room, kitchenette, bathroom with a shower that barely worked. But it was cheap, available immediately, and Mike didn't care about credit checks or references. "You look like a man who's been through some crap," he said, handing me the keys. "Rent's due on the 1st. Don't burn the place down." My new neighbor was an ex-Marine named Mason, mid-40s, graying at the temples, with the kind of steady presence that comes from seeing the worst the world has to offer and surviving it. He helped me carry my few belongings up the narrow stairs. "Wife?" he asked, not because he was nosy, but because he recognized the signs. Soon-to-be ex-wife. "Kids?" "None that are mine, apparently." He nodded like that explained everything. "You hungry? Got some leftover chili." We sat in his apartment, which was identical to mine, but somehow felt like a home. Pictures on the walls, books on the shelves, a guitar in the corner. "How long since you got out?" I asked. 8 years. Did 2 tours in Afghanistan, came back to find my wife had cleaned out our bank account and moved to Phoenix with her yoga instructor. "What did you do?" Mason took a sip of his beer and smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "I got creative." Over the next week, Mason became my unlikely mentor in the art of controlled revenge. He taught me about surveillance, about patience, about the difference between justice and vengeance. "The key," he said as we installed a small camera in the parking lot across from Derek's gym, "is to never do anything illegal. You just facilitate their downfall." The camera was motion-activated and uploaded footage to a cloud server. Completely legal, since it was pointed at a public parking lot. If it happened to capture Derek's comings and goings, well, that was just a side effect. "Now what?" I asked. "Now we watch and wait. People like your cousin always give you what you need. You just have to be patient enough to collect it." I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Patricia Wells, not because I wanted to heal, but because I wanted to understand. How had I missed the signs? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, how could I use that knowledge? "Tell me about your marriage," Dr. Wells said during our first session. "My wife is pregnant with my cousin's baby and has convinced half my family that I'm an abusive drunk," I said. "How's that for an opening line?" She didn't flinch. "How does that make you feel?" "Like burning the world down." "That's a normal response to betrayal, but what are you going to do with those feelings?" I smiled. "Something productive." The surveillance footage from Derek's gym was more revealing than I'd hoped. He wasn't just seeing Nicole. There was a blonde in a red BMW who showed up twice a week, a brunette in yoga pants who always stayed late, and at least 3 other regulars who seemed to get very personal training sessions. Derek was a player, and players always leave evidence. I spent my evenings in the library researching everything I could about him: social media posts, business records, even old high school yearbook entries. I learned that he'd been fired from 2 previous gym jobs for inappropriate conduct with clients. I learned that he owed $12,000 in back taxes. I learned that his personal training certification had expired 6 months ago. All of it legal, all of it public record, all of it useful. One night, I followed him to the Fairfield Inn on the east side of town. He met the blonde with the red BMW in the parking lot. They went to room 237. I sat in my truck with a long-lens camera Mason had loaned me and documented everything. 2 hours later, they came out together. She kissed him goodbye and he grabbed her butt like he owned it. She laughed and climbed into her BMW. I followed her to a nice subdivision in South Tulsa. The mailbox read Stevens. I wrote down the address. The next morning, I looked up the property records. James and Michelle Stevens, married 16 years, 2 children. I found James's LinkedIn profile. He was a regional manager for a pharmaceutical company, traveled a lot for work. I didn't plan to use the information, not yet, but it was nice to know it was there, like money in the bank. Installing the GPS tracker under Derek's truck was easier than I'd expected. Mason had shown me how to use a magnetic case that would stick to the underside of the frame, invisible unless you knew where to look. Military grade, he said, handing me the small black device. Battery lasts 6 months, updates every 10 minutes. Just don't let him catch you. I waited until 3 a.m. on a Tuesday night, when Derek would be sound asleep in my bed with my wife. The thought made my jaw clench, but I pushed the anger down. Anger made you sloppy, and I couldn't afford to be sloppy. His lifted Dodge Ram was parked in my driveway like he belonged there. I slid under the back end, found a good spot on the differential housing, and attached the tracker. 30 seconds, in and out. The next day, I watched Derek's movements on my laptop like a hawk studying prey. Work, gym, lunch at Subway, back to work, dinner at my house. A predictable routine that would make surveillance easy. But on Thursday, things got interesting. At 2:17 p.m., Derek left the gym and drove to the Marriott downtown. He stayed for exactly 93 minutes, then drove to a medical building on Brookside. I cross-referenced the address with the building directory, Dr. Amanda Harrison, OBGYN, so they were keeping the baby. Part of me had hoped Nicole would come to her senses, but apparently her senses were as corrupted as everything else about her. Friday afternoon, Derek broke his routine. Instead of going straight home after work, he made a detour to a liquor store, then drove to a residential area I didn't recognize. The tracker showed him parked on Maple Street for 4 hours. I decided to take a look. The house was a modest ranch style with a well-maintained yard and a Honda Civic in the driveway. Through the living room window, I could see Derek on a couch with a redhead I'd never seen before. She was young, maybe mid-20s, and she was sitting in his lap while he fed her wine from his glass. Nicole thought she was the only one. Nicole was an idiot. I was photographing them through the window when Derek's head suddenly snapped toward the front door. He said something to the redhead, who quickly moved away from him. A few seconds later, he was walking out the front door, looking around suspiciously. I ducked behind a neighbor's hedge, but it was too late. He'd seen my truck. "Hey!" he shouted, jogging toward me. "What the hell are you doing here?" I ran. Not because I was scared of Derek, but because getting arrested for stalking would ruin everything I'd worked for. I made it to my truck and started the engine just as he reached the street. "Travis, you sick freak!" he yelled, slapping his hand on my tailgate as I pulled away. "I'm calling the cops." I drove straight to the industrial district on the north side of town, a maze of warehouses and manufacturing plants that I knew better than Derek did. If he wanted to chase me, I'd give him a chase. His headlights appeared in my rearview mirror about 2 miles later. The lifted Ram had more power than my truck, but I had 20 years of driving these streets. I took a hard right into the Alcoa plant parking lot, then another right between 2 buildings. Derek followed, his tires squealing on the asphalt. I could see his face in my side mirror, twisted with rage and adrenaline. I led him deeper into the industrial complex, through narrow lanes between storage tanks and conveyor systems. Finally, I yanked the wheel hard left and drove my truck behind a row of dumpsters, killed the engine, and jumped out. Derek's truck roared past my hiding spot, his engine echoing off the metal buildings. I slipped between 2 dumpsters and watched him circle the area like a frustrated predator. "Come out, you coward!" he yelled, his voice carrying across the empty lot. Face me like a man! I stayed hidden, controlling my breathing the way Mason had taught me. Derek spent 20 minutes searching, getting more frustrated by the minute. Finally, he gave up and drove away, his tires throwing gravel. When I was sure he was gone, I walked back to my truck. There was a note under the windshield wiper, written in Derek's sloppy handwriting. "Next time I see you, you're dead, cousin." I folded the note carefully and put it in my wallet. Evidence for later. That night, I called Mason and told him what happened. "He's getting desperate," Mason said. "That's good. Desperate people make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind that finish them." Nicole's baby shower was scheduled for Sunday afternoon at her mother's house in Brookside. I wasn't invited, obviously, but restraining orders are funny things. They keep you away from specific people and places, but they don't stop you from driving on public roads. Rebecca's house sat on a corner lot with a circular driveway and enough parking for 20 cars. I counted 18 vehicles when I pulled up at 2:30 p.m., including Derek's truck parked right next to Nicole's Camry, like they were already married. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, watching through the living room windows. Nicole was opening presents, surrounded by women who'd known me for years but apparently had no problem celebrating my wife's pregnancy with another man's baby. The envelope in my passenger seat contained the DNA results I'd gotten through less than official channels. A friend of Mason's who worked at a private lab had been willing to run the tests on samples I'd collected from Derek's gym locker and Nicole's hairbrush. The results were exactly what I'd expected, but seeing them in black and white still hit like a punch to the gut. I got out of my truck and walked up the front steps. Through the door's glass panel, I could see into the living room where Nicole sat in a chair decorated with pink and white ribbons. She was laughing at something Jenna had said, one hand resting on her barely visible bump. I rang the doorbell. The chatter inside stopped immediately. I could hear someone whisper, "Oh my God, it's Travis!" Rebecca opened the door with her face already set in disapproving lines. "Travis, you're not supposed to be here. The restraining order doesn't apply to your house, Rebecca. Can I come in?" "Absolutely not. Nicole doesn't want to see you." "I think she'll want to see what I have to show her." Nicole appeared behind her mother wearing a pale yellow maternity dress that made her look younger and more innocent than she had any right to look. "What do you want, Travis?" she asked, her voice steady but her eyes frightened. I held up the envelope. "Just wanted to drop off a baby gift." "I'm calling the police," Rebecca said, reaching for her phone. "Go ahead," I said, pushing past her into the living room. 23 women stared at me like I was a wild animal that had wandered into their tea party. Derek stood up from his spot on the couch, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "You need to leave," he said. "Now." "I'll leave," I said, unzipping my jacket. "Just as soon as I deliver this." I pulled out the envelope and held it up so everyone could see it. The return address clearly showed the name of the genetic testing lab. "According to these DNA results," I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the room, "the baby Nicole's carrying isn't mine." The silence that followed was deafening. Nicole's face went white, and she gripped the arms of her chair like she might fall over. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Is it?" I opened the envelope and pulled out the lab report. Probability of paternity, 0%. "Would you like me to read the details?" Rebecca stepped forward, her face twisted with rage. "How dare you!" Her hand connected with my cheek in a slap that echoed through the room. My head snapped to the side, but I didn't move otherwise. "Feel better?" I asked. Derek started toward me, but I was ready for him this time. I grabbed the nearest table, a decorative piece covered with gift bags, and shoved it in his direction. He stumbled backward, gifts scattering across the floor. "Stay back," I warned him. "You've caused enough trouble." I turned to Nicole, who was now crying silently, mascara running down her cheeks. 20 years, I said quietly. 20 years I loved you. I would have died for you. Travis, please. I would have raised that baby. I would have convinced myself it was mine because I loved you that much. I dropped the DNA results on the floor at her feet. "But you couldn't even give me that choice, could you? You had to rub my face in it. You had to make me the villain." Sirens were getting closer. Someone had called the police after all. "You want to know the really funny part?" I said, looking around the room at all the shocked faces. "This isn't even his first time. Derek's been cheating on you with at least 4 other women since this started. Did you think you were special?" Nicole made a sound like a wounded animal. Derek's face went from red to pale. "That's a lie," he said, I pulled out my phone and showed them one of the photos I'd taken at the Fairfield Inn. Derek and the blonde, kissing in the parking lot. Tuesday night, I said. Room 237. Should I show them the others? I walked toward the door as the police cars pulled into the driveway. As I passed Derek, I leaned close enough that only he could hear me. Time to finish cooking, I whispered. Nicole's career in public relations had been her pride and joy long before she met me. She'd started as an assistant at a small firm and worked her way up to senior account manager at Hartwell & Associates, one of Tulsa's most prestigious PR companies. She was good at it, too. Had a natural talent for spinning stories, making people look better than they really were. I used to joke that she could make Ted Bundy look like a Sunday school teacher. Monday morning, she was scheduled to present a campaign proposal to Riverside Development, a major client looking to rebrand their luxury apartment complex. It was a big opportunity, the kind that could make her career. I knew because Derek had been stupid enough to post about it on Instagram. So proud of my girl landing this huge presentation. Power couple success. The love letter I'd found in Derek's gym locker was handwritten on Nicole's personal letterhead, the expensive stuff with her name embossed at the top. 3 pages of intimate details about their relationship, including specific references to their plans to leave Tulsa after the baby was born. I can't wait to start our life together in Austin, she'd written. Just you, me, and our little one. Travis will never find us there. She'd signed it, Forever Yours, N, with a lipstick kiss below her signature. I made copies, lots of copies. The audio recording was even better. Derek had a habit of leaving voicemails when Nicole didn't answer her phone, and she had a habit of saving them. I'd found them on the iPad before it was locked in the house. 27 messages, some romantic, some sexual, all completely damning. My favorite was from 3 weeks ago. Baby, I know you feel guilty about Travis, but he's holding you back. You're too good for him, too smart, too beautiful. When we move to Austin, you'll see how much better life can be without all that small-town baggage. I spent Sunday night creating anonymous email accounts and uploading the files to multiple cloud servers. Monday morning at 9 a.m., exactly 30 minutes before Nicole's presentation was scheduled to begin, I sent everything to the entire leadership team at Hartwell & Associates. The subject line read, Character references for Nicole Galt, account manager. I also sent copies to the executives at Riverside Development, Nicole's mother Rebecca, and everyone on her Facebook friends list. Then I sat in my truck outside the Hartwell building and waited. Nicole's silver Camry pulled into the parking garage at 9:20 a.m. She was running late, probably spent extra time on her hair and makeup for the big presentation. Derek's truck followed her in, which surprised me. Maybe he was planning to celebrate afterward. At 9:47 a.m., people started coming out of the building. First one person, then 3, then a small crowd gathering on the sidewalk. Everyone had their phones out. Derek emerged at 9:52 a.m., moving fast with his head down. His face was red, and he kept looking back at the building like something was chasing him. Nicole came out 5 minutes later, walking like she was in a daze. Her carefully styled hair was disheveled, and she carried her presentation materials in a loose bundle against her chest. When she reached her car, she just stood there for a moment, staring at nothing. Then she threw her briefcase as hard as she could against the concrete wall. Papers scattered everywhere, catching the wind and blowing across the parking garage like oversized confetti. That evening, the story made the local news. A prominent Tulsa public relations manager has been terminated after explicit audio recordings and private correspondence were made public during a client presentation, the anchor reported. Nicole Galt, 36, was dismissed from Hartwell & Associates after what company officials called conduct incompatible with our professional standards. They didn't use Derek's name, but they didn't need to. The story had enough details that everyone who mattered would know exactly who the unnamed male personal trainer was. My phone rang at 11:30 p.m., Nicole's number. You destroyed me, she said without preamble. Her voice was hollow, like all the fight had gone out of her. You destroyed yourself, I replied. I just made sure people could see it. That was my career, Travis. Everything I worked for. Yeah? Well, this was my marriage. Everything I worked for. She was quiet for a long moment. In the background, I could hear Derek saying something, but I couldn't make out the words. We're leaving town, she said finally. Good. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. The baby isn't mine. We've established that. Another long pause. I never meant for it to happen this way, she said. Yes, you did. You just didn't think you'd get caught. I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside my window, the neon sign from the motel office flickered red and blue across the parking lot. It wasn't much of a view, but it was honest. More honest than anything I'd had in years. Attorney Sarah Sykes called me Tuesday morning with news that made me smile for the first time in weeks. The restraining order has been vacated, she said. Turns out your wife's claims of domestic violence were somewhat undermined by her very public adultery scandal. What does that mean? It means you can go home, Travis. The judge ruled that she filed a restraining order in bad faith to gain advantage in divorce proceedings. She has 48 hours to remove her belongings from the marital residence. I drove to my house, for the first time in 3 weeks. The key still didn't work. She'd never given me the new one. But a locksmith took care of that problem in 20 minutes. Inside, everything looked exactly the same but felt completely different. Our wedding pictures were still on the mantel, but someone had turned them face down. The kitchen table where we'd eaten breakfast together for 15 years looked like a prop from someone else's life. Derek's stuff was everywhere. His protein powder on the kitchen counter, his workout clothes in the laundry basket, his deodorant in our bathroom cabinet. I gathered it all up and put it in garbage bags on the front porch. Then I called a cleaning service and had them scrub every surface in the house. The court hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. Nicole showed up with a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Derek came too, wearing an ill-fitting suit that made him look like a kid playing dress-up. Your Honor, Nicole's lawyer began, my client admits that her marriage has been troubled, but she contests the allegations of fraud and abandonment. Mr. Patterson, Judge Williams interrupted, have you reviewed the evidence submitted by the petitioner? Patterson shuffled through his papers. Yes, Your Honor, but the photographs, the recorded conversations, the written correspondence? Your Honor, my client's personal life, while perhaps not ideal, doesn't constitute legal grounds for... Judge Williams held up a hand. Mr. Patterson, your client filed a false domestic violence report, obtained a restraining order under false pretenses, changed the locks on the marital home to exclude her husband, and has been cohabiting with another man while pregnant with his child. She has systematically attempted to defraud this court and her husband. I'm granting the petitioner's motion for immediate possession of the marital home and all assets therein. Nicole started crying. Derek reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm ordering genetic testing once the child is born. If Mr. Galt is not the biological father, Mrs. Galt will be responsible for all legal fees and court costs. Your Honor, Patterson tried again. My client is pregnant and has nowhere to go. Your client should have considered that before committing adultery and perjury, Judge Williams said, coldly. This court is not in the business of enabling fraud. Mr. Galt, you have immediate possession of your home. Mrs. Galt, you have until Friday at 6 p.m. to collect your personal belongings. Outside the courthouse, Derek caught up with me in the parking lot. This isn't over, he said, trying to look threatening in his borrowed suit. Yeah, it is, I replied. You just haven't figured it out yet. Nicole needs me. We're having a baby. Nicole needs someone who can pay for that baby. Last I checked, unemployed personal trainers with expired certifications don't make much money. His face went red. I'll find something. Good luck with that. Your reputation in this town is pretty much shot. I started to walk away, but he grabbed my arm. She loves me, he said desperately. Not you. Me. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. Derek, I said quietly, she's a liar and a cheat who destroyed a 20-year marriage for a few minutes of fun in my garage. What makes you think she won't do the same thing to you? He let go of my arm like it had burned him. In the courthouse steps behind us, I could see Nicole crying into her phone, probably calling her mother. She looked small and lost, nothing like the confident woman who'd humiliated me in front of my whole family. For just a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Derek's termination from Elite Fitness came 3 days after the courthouse hearing. The gym's owner, Marcus Webb, called me personally to let me know. Travis, I wanted you to hear this from me, he said. I had to let Derek go. The whole situation has become too much of a distraction for our clients. I appreciate the call, Marcus. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about what happened to you. Derek seemed like a good kid, but apparently I was wrong about his character. Derek tried to salvage his career by starting a YouTube channel called Truth and Fitness. His first video, titled My Side of the Story, got 347 views and 23 comments, most of them from people who knew him personally and weren't impressed with his explanation. "Bro, you slept with your cousin's wife while she was married," one comment read. "There's no your side to that." His second video, a workout routine filmed in his cramped apartment, got 89 views. His third video, where he tried to explain the misunderstandings about his certification status, got 34 views and was eventually taken down. I didn't have to do anything to make Derek's YouTube career fail. He managed that all by himself. But I did send the link to a few fitness influencers I'd found online, along with copies of the photos showing Derek's various affairs. They shared it with their audiences as an example of what not to do in the fitness industry. Within a week, Derek's channel had been turned into a meme. Screenshots of his desperate explanations were shared across fitness forums with captions like, "When you're trying to explain why cheating with your cousin's wife was actually a good business decision." Meanwhile, I was rebuilding. I took a week off work to renovate my house, stripping away every trace of Nicole and Derek's presence. New paint in the bedroom, new sheets, new furniture in the living room. I even replaced the workbench in the garage, though I kept the old one in storage, evidence for the divorce proceedings. The backyard required special attention. I tore out the flower beds Nicole had planted, the ones she'd tended while planning her affair. I built a new deck around the grill area, expanded the patio, and installed proper outdoor lighting. When I was finished, it looked like a completely different space. Clean, masculine, mine. Gene stopped by on a Saturday afternoon while I was testing the new grill setup. He stood in the doorway to the backyard, surveying the changes. "Looks good, son," he said. "Real good." We hadn't spoken since the 4th of July disaster, but he didn't mention that. Gene had always been better at showing up late than explaining where he'd been. "Beer?" I offered. "Don't mind if I do." We stood on the new deck, drinking Budweiser and watching the sun set over suburban Tulsa. For the first time in months, I felt something approaching peace. "You know," Gene said after a while, "I never liked that boy much." "Derek, could have fooled me. You seemed to get along fine at the barbecue. Sometimes you got to let people hang themselves with their own rope. Give them enough time, they'll always show you who they really are." Is that your version of an apology? Gene finished his beer and set the empty bottle on the deck railing. "I'm not good at apologies, Travis, but I'm proud of how you handled this. Could have gone a lot of different ways. It's not over yet." "No," he agreed, but you're winning." That night, Nicole called me from an unknown number. "I need to get the rest of my things," she said without preamble. "Court order says you had until Friday at 6 p.m. That was 3 days ago. Please, Travis, I've got nowhere to put them. Should have thought of that before you decided to play house with my cousin." "He left," she said quietly. I paused, beer halfway to my lips. "What?" "Derek left, yesterday. Said he needed space to figure things out." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let me guess." The reality of supporting a pregnant, unemployed woman wasn't as appealing as he thought. "Don't," she said, her voice breaking. "Please don't." "Where are you staying?" "My mom's. But she's not happy with me right now." I could imagine. Rebecca had built her whole identity around being the mother of a successful, respectable daughter. Having Nicole move back home, pregnant and unemployed, probably wasn't part of her retirement plans. "I'll pack your stuff and leave it on the porch," I said. "You can pick it up tomorrow." "Travis?" "What, Nicole? Do you hate me?" I considered the question seriously. Did I hate her? The woman who'd shared my bed for 20 years? Who'd laughed at my jokes and held my hand through my mother's funeral? Who destroyed everything good between us for a few moments of excitement with my cousin? "No," I said finally. "I don't hate you, but I don't love you anymore either. And that's worse, isn't it?" She hung up without answering. 3 weeks later, I decided to host another barbecue. Not because I'd forgiven anyone, and certainly not because I wanted a reconciliation, but because I wanted to see how the story ended. I sent invitations to the same people who'd been at the 4th of July disaster. Gene, Jenna, and Caleb, Uncle Pete, Aunt Martha, even Rebecca. The message was simple. Second chance barbecue, same ribs, new attitude, Saturday, 2 p.m. Most of them came, drawn by curiosity if nothing else. Gene arrived first, carrying a six-pack of beer and wearing the same shirt he'd worn to the last barbecue. Jenna came with Caleb, who looked nervous but excited. Even Uncle Pete made the drive from Amarillo. Rebecca was the surprise. I hadn't expected her to show up, given how thoroughly her daughter's life had imploded. But there she was at 2:15, carrying a potato salad and wearing a grim expression that suggested she had something to say. "Travis," she said, setting the dish on the table, "thank you for inviting me. Thank you for coming. I owe you an apology." That was unexpected. "Rebecca, no, let me say this, I was wrong about what happened. When Nicole told me you'd attacked Derek for no reason, I believed her. I should have known better. You were protecting your daughter. I was enabling her poor choices. There's a difference." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of Derek's truck pulling into the driveway. Everyone turned to look, surprised. I hadn't invited him, but apparently someone had told him about the gathering. Nicole got out of the passenger side, moving carefully with her now obvious pregnancy. She was about 5 months along, showing enough that there was no hiding it anymore. Derek followed her, looking like a man walking to his own execution. "This should be interesting," Gene muttered. They walked into the backyard together, but their body language told the real story. Derek stayed a step behind Nicole, like he was ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. Nicole kept her eyes on the ground, her face pale and drawn. "Hello, everyone," she said quietly. The responses were polite but cold. These people had known Nicole for years, had watched her grow up, had celebrated her marriage to me. Seeing her pregnant with another man's baby had shifted their loyalties in ways that probably surprised everyone. "I hope you don't mind us coming," Derek said, trying to sound casual. "We were in the neighborhood." "Actually," I said, walking over to the grill, "I'm glad you're here. I have something for you." I reached into the cooler beside the grill and pulled out an envelope. Derek's face went white when he saw it. "What's that?" Nicole asked. "Why don't you open it and find out?" I said, handing the envelope to Derek. His hands were shaking slightly as he tore it open. He read the contents silently, his face going from pale to gray. Then he looked up at me with something approaching terror in his eyes. "What does it say?" Nicole demanded. Derek tried to speak, but no words came out. He just handed her the paper. Nicole read it once, then again, then a third time. When she finally looked up, her face was the color of ash. "This can't be right," she whispered. "What is it?" Jenna asked. Nicole looked around the circle of faces, all waiting for an explanation she couldn't give. It's another DNA test," she said finally. "And?" Rebecca prompted. Nicole's voice was barely audible. "Derek isn't the father either." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in downtown Tulsa. Derek finally found his voice. "That's impossible. We've been together for months." "Apparently not exclusively," I said. "What do you mean?" Nicole asked. I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos I'd taken outside the house on Maple Street, the ones of Derek with the young redhead. "Meet Amber," I said. 24 years old, works at the Starbucks on Yale. "Derek's been seeing her since March." Derek's face crumpled. "Nicole, I can explain." "Can you?" she asked, her voice rising. "Can you explain how you've been sleeping with someone else while telling me you loved me? While telling me we were going to start a life together?" "It wasn't serious with her," Derek said desperately. "You're the one I want to be with." "Then whose baby is this?" Nicole screamed. All eyes turned to me. I took a long drink of my beer, savoring the moment. "According to my research," I said calmly, "you should probably ask your personal trainer from the country club gym." "The one you were seeing before Derek." Nicole made a sound like a wounded animal. "How did you find out? Security cameras are everywhere these days, Nicole. You'd be amazed what you can learn if you know where to look." Derek threw his beer bottle at the grill with enough force to shatter it. The explosion of glass and foam made everyone jump. "You son of a witch!" he yelled. "You set this whole thing up?" "I didn't set anything up," I said calmly. "I just let you be yourselves." The bottle had hit the propane tank, and now there was a steady hiss of gas escaping. Everyone started backing away from the grill as the smell of propane filled the air. "Derek, you idiot!" Gene yelled. "You just ruptured the gas line!" But Derek wasn't listening. He was advancing on me with his fists clenched, rage and humiliation twisting his features into something ugly. "I'm going to destroy you," he snarled. "No," I said, pulling out my phone. You're not? I hit the record button and held the phone up so everyone could see. But you just threatened to eliminate me in front of 8 witnesses while destroying my property in a fit of rage. That's assault, terroristic threatening, and destruction of property. The hissing from the grill was getting louder. Uncle Pete was already dialing 911. Derek, Nicole said, tugging at his arm. We need to leave. Now. But Derek was beyond reason. He lunged at me, swinging wild punches that I easily avoided. I'd been expecting this moment for weeks, and I was ready for it. I grabbed his wrist as he swung, twisted his arm behind his back, and drove him face first into the deck railing. He went down hard, blood streaming from his nose. Stay down, I warned him. But Derek wasn't done. He scrambled to his feet and charged again, this time catching me in the midsection and driving us both toward the damaged grill. That's when the propane ignited. The explosion wasn't as dramatic as you see in movies. No giant fireball, no shockwave that knocked everyone off their feet. Just a sudden whoosh of flame that engulfed the grill area and sent everyone scrambling for safety. Derek and I were closest to the blast. The heat singed the hair on my arms and left my face feeling sunburned. But we both managed to roll away before the fire could do real damage. Jesus Christ! Jean yelled, pulling Rebecca away from the flames. Everyone get back! The fire department arrived 6 minutes later, followed closely by 2 police cars and an ambulance. They had the fire out in less than 10 minutes, but my new deck was charred black, and the grill was a twisted mass of melted metal. Derek sat on the curb with a paramedic cleaning the blood from his nose while Officer Martinez took statements from witnesses. His story kept changing. First, he claimed I'd attacked him unprovoked, then that the explosion was an accident, then that I'd somehow caused it intentionally. My story never changed because it was true. Derek had threatened me, thrown a bottle at my grill, and started a fight that resulted in property damage and personal injury. Mr. Galt, Martinez said after interviewing everyone, do you want to press charges? I looked at Derek, who was now in handcuffs after the paramedic finished treating his nose. He looked pathetic sitting there in his torn shirt, blood on his collar, his reputation in ruins. Yes, I said. All of them. Nicole sat on my front steps, crying quietly while Jenna tried to comfort her. She looked lost and broken, a woman who'd gambled everything on the wrong man and lost spectacularly. Travis, she called out as the police prepared to load Derek into their car. Can we talk? I walked over to where she sat. Up close, I could see how much the stress had aged her. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago, and her skin had a grayish cast that spoke of sleepless nights and poor nutrition. What do you want, Nicole? I'm sorry, she said simply. For all of it. For Derek, for lying, for the restraining order, for everything. I know you are. Do you think we could ever... No, I said, not unkindly. We couldn't. She nodded like she'd expected that answer. What am I going to do? Figure it out. You're a smart woman, Nicole. You'll find a way. The baby isn't my problem. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but she didn't argue. We both knew it was true. Derek was loaded into the police car, still protesting his innocence to anyone who would listen. As they drove away, he pressed his face against the window and stared at me with pure hatred. I stared back until the car disappeared around the corner. Well, Jean said, surveying the damage to my deck, that was interesting. That's one word for it, I replied. The guests started leaving shortly after that. Rebecca hugged me goodbye, which surprised me. Uncle Pete promised to call soon. Jenna loaded a shell-shocked Nicole into her car and drove away without saying anything else. By 6 p.m., it was just Jean and me standing in my ruined backyard, drinking beer and looking at the charred remains of my barbecue setup. You planned this, he said. It wasn't a question. I planned to expose the truth. The rest of it was Derek's choice. The DNA test that proved he wasn't the father, that was real? I nodded. Had it run twice to be sure. Turns out Nicole's been busier than anyone realized. Jean shook his head. That girl always was too smart for her own good. Thought she could juggle 3 men at once and keep them all happy. 4 men, I corrected. There's also some guy named Brad from her yoga class. Jesus. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the last wisps of smoke rise from the destroyed grill. What happens now? Jean asked. Now Derek goes to jail for a while. Nicole figures out how to raise someone else's baby, and I start over. You sound okay with that? I considered the question. Was I okay with it? My marriage was over, my cousin was in jail, and my backyard looked like a war zone. But for the first time in months, I felt something approaching peace. Yeah, I said finally. I think I am. That night, I sat on my front porch with a beer and watched the sunset. Tomorrow, I'd start cleaning up the mess in my backyard. Next week, I'd start looking for a new grill. Next month, I'd probably start dating again. But tonight, I was content to sit in the quiet and enjoy the fact that, for the first time since July, nobody was lying to me. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason. Saw the news, you okay? I typed back, better than okay. Want to come over for a beer? On my way. I smiled and took another drink. It was going to be a good evening. The headlines in the Tulsa world the next morning were everything I could have hoped for. Local man arrested after domestic violence incident leads to property damage, and personal trainer charged in connection with backyard explosion. Derek's mugshot made the front page of the local section. He looked exactly like what he was, a small-time player who'd gotten in over his head and lost everything. The charges against him were substantial. Assault, terroristic threatening, destruction of property, and violation of a peace bond that had been issued after our fight at the baby shower. His bail was set at $15,000, which might as well have been $15 million for someone with no job and no savings. Nicole tried to raise the money, but her mother refused to help. Rebecca had apparently reached her limit with her daughter's poor choices. Jenna started a GoFundMe page that raised exactly $37 before she took it down in embarrassment. Derek spent 4 days in county jail before accepting a plea bargain, 6 months in jail, 2 years probation, and restitution for the damage to my property. He'd also have to complete anger management classes and community service. Nicole visited him once during those 4 days. According to the visitor logs that became public record, she stayed for exactly 11 minutes. The truth about the baby's paternity came out during Derek's sentencing hearing. Nicole had been forced to submit to genetic testing as part of the investigation, and the results confirmed what I'd known all along. The father was James Mitchell, a married personal trainer from Southern Hills Country Club. Mitchell promptly moved to Arizona with his wife and 2 kids rather than deal with the scandal. He left behind a resignation letter and no forwarding address. Nicole was alone, pregnant, unemployed, and radioactive in the local professional community. She lasted 3 weeks at her mother's house before Rebecca asked her to find somewhere else to live. She ended up in a studio apartment on the south side of town, the kind of place that rents by the week and doesn't ask for references. I saw her once at the grocery store, moving slowly through the produce section with a cart that held mostly generic brands and discount items. She saw me too, but neither of us said anything. There was nothing left to say. The insurance company paid for the damage to my deck and grill, minus the deductible. I used the money to build something better than what I'd had before: a larger deck, a professional-grade smoker, and a fire pit for cool evenings. I threw another barbecue 6 weeks later. This time, the guest list was smaller but more honest. Gene, Mason, Uncle Pete, and a few guys from work. No drama, no explosions, just good food and better company. Mason brought his guitar and played some old Johnny Cash songs while we sat around the fire pit. Gene told stories about Vietnam that he'd never shared before. I cooked the best ribs of my life. You know what the funny thing is? I said, as we watched the fire burn down to embers. What's that? Mason asked. I'm happier now than I was 6 months ago. My wife cheated on me, my cousin destroyed my property, and my marriage is over. But I'm actually happier. That's not funny, Gene said. That's truth. Sometimes you gotta burn the old life down before you can build a new one. I thought about that as I cleaned up later. The old Travis had been content to live with lies, to accept whatever scraps of affection Nicole threw his way, to pretend that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. The new Travis demanded better, expected honesty, refused to settle for anything less than what he deserved. It was a lesson that had cost me everything I thought I wanted, but it had given me something more valuable: self-respect. My phone rang as I was loading the dishwasher. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Austin, Texas. Travis? Nicole's voice small and hesitant. What do you want, Nicole? I had the baby. I said nothing. It's a girl, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. She's beautiful. Congratulations. I named her Emma, after your mother. That hit me harder than I'd expected. My mother had died 8 years ago, and Nicole had been with me through all of it. The diagnosis, the treatments, the final weeks in hospice. She'd held my hand at the funeral and helped me clean out Mom's house afterward. Why? I asked. Because she was the only mother I ever really had, Nicole said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. Because I wanted some part of my daughter to be connected to something good. Nicole, I don't want anything from you, she said quickly. I'm not asking for money or help or forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. How are you managing? I got a job at a telemarketing company. It's not much, but it pays the bills. Emma's in daycare during the day, and I take care of her at night. We're okay. Good. Derek called me last week from jail. He wants to see me when he gets out. Are you going to? No. I'm done with men who lie to me. Even if that means I'm done with men altogether. We talked for another 10 minutes, carefully avoiding the dangerous topics. She told me about Emma's first smile, about the apartment she'd found in a better neighborhood, about the night classes she was taking to finish her degree. I told her about my new job promotion, about Jean's improving health, about the vegetable garden I was planning for spring. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. Travis? She said, as we were getting ready to hang up. Yeah? Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I looked out my kitchen window at the deck where everything had ended, where Derek had thrown that bottle and set our lives on fire. The scorch marks were gone now, covered by new wood and fresh stain, but I knew they were still there underneath. I already have, I said, and realized it was true. After we hung up, I walked out to my deck and stood where the grill used to be. The new smoker was bigger, better, more efficient than what I'd had before. But sometimes I missed the old one, with its quirks and hot spots and familiar rhythms. Change was like that. Even when it was for the better, there was still something to mourn for what you'd lost. I opened the smoker and checked the ribs I'd been cooking low and slow for the past 6 hours. They were perfect, the meat tender enough to fall off the bone, the smoke ring deep and red. No one would burn me twice. That was the promise I'd made to myself, and it was a promise I intended to keep. But maybe, just maybe, I was ready to let someone try to warm me up again. I pulled the ribs from the smoker and set them on the cutting board to rest. The smell filled the evening air, rich and complex and honest. Tomorrow I'd start fresh. Tonight I'd enjoy what I'd built.